on Foxy 107, 104.
Good Sunday morning. Hello, good morning. Enlightening, empowering, entertaining. Hello and welcome to Spectacular Magazine Radio Show. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley, CEO and editor of Spectacular Magazine. Spectacular Magazine Radio Show on Foxy is your community-focused resource, shining a spotlight on community issues that impact our neighborhoods. We want to ask you to like us, visit Spectacular Mag, like us on all social media, follow us on all social media. And I have to say good morning, and I want to say thank you very much to a very spectacular team. That's Lawrence Davis, Mel Brown, Keith McKinney, Carl McKinney, Willie Hyman, Brian Hayes, Tosh Owens, Annika Green, Lauren Creasy, Nordica Jones, Alexandria Glenn, Donald Watson, Alonzo Eubanks. Thank you so much for making up a spectacular team. I want to set the tone for you. I want to set the scene for you. It's February 1st, 1968. We're in Memphis, Tennessee. It's pouring rain. The streets are flooding. Sewers are overflooding. Still, the Memphis Public Works Department is requiring all of its sanitation workers, which happen to be all black men, to continue to work in the downpour. Now, that day, two sanitation workers, Echo Cole and Robert Walker, took shelter from the rain in the back of the garbage truck. So rather than hanging off the side, they said they're going to get into the back just to stay out of the rain. As they rode in the back of the truck, something happened with one of the electrical switches. It malfunctioned. The compactor turned on. Cole and Walker were crushed by the garbage truck compactor. The Public Works Department refused to compensate their families, even though they were killed on the job. 11 days after their death, as many as 1,300 black sanitation workers in Memphis walked off the job, protesting horrible working conditions, abuse, racism, and discrimination by the city of Memphis. The Memphis sanitation workers' strike would win the support of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. and which led to his assassination less than 2 months later on April 4th, 1968. Memphis finally recognized the union on April 16th. Efforts are currently being made to organize unions right here in North Carolina. So now, 50 years later, is North Carolina ready for unions? In the studio with me now is field organizer, Carolina Public Service Workers Union, UE Local 150, Dante Strobino. But I want to invite you, my listener, to join in the conversation. Call us with your questions or comments. That's 1-800-467-3699. So that's 1-800-467-FOXY, F-O-X-Y. That's 3699. Good morning, Dante.
Good morning, Phyllis.
Good morning, and thank you so much for coming this morning.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we talked about efforts in 1968 in Alabama, but actually there were efforts to organize in North Carolina before 1968, wasn't there?
Oh, I mean, yes, ma'am. I mean, as long as there's been oppression and repression, workers and communities have been organizing, to overcome that. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So when was the first efforts to organize?
Well, or to organize labor, I mean, W. Du Bois writes about, the strikes that slaves took to rebel against slavery that actually broke the back of the Confederacy, right?
Okay, yeah.
And the Knights of Labor had been organizing, back in the 1800s, and there had been a lot of organizing of workers. There's a long history, here in the South, of organized labor that often doesn't get told.
And tell us a little bit about it. If I mention Ella Mae Wiggins, and let's talk about her at the efforts there and what happened in Gastonia.
Yes, ma'am. So a lot of folks know North Carolina was really industrialized by textiles, and tobacco was a big major industry. And going back to the late 20s and early 30s, there had been major struggles by textile workers, particularly in Gastonia, but around the country, to organize. And Ella Mae Wiggins, who was a worker in the plant at the time, she was actually later killed because she dared support the struggle to unite black and white workers, right, to bring together workers to fight against their common oppression and their employers. And she was killed in a struggle, but it led to, in 1934, one of the largest strikes, if not the largest strike in the U.S. history. People don't know about this. It started here with textile mills. It eventually spread all the way up to Massachusetts and all the way across the country in textile mills. That made a major impact in organized labor.
Was that a part of Operation Dixie?
So Operation Dixie came a few years later, when after some of these major struggles that happened in the 30s, and after the federal government actually passed the Wagner Act that actually allowed, because there was major sit-down strikes in Detroit and in Minneapolis, and there was a general strike in San Francisco, but still workers here were still organizing. Black and white workers were both organizing. And so the AFL and the CIO at that point realized that they really needed to focus on organizing labor in the South, because you had a lot of these Dixiecrats that were pushing for the passage of right-to-work laws that would try to hold back the ability of particularly black workers here in the South to organize. And so Operation Dixie was a campaign of organized labor in the early 40s to kind of go in and try to put some real resources on the ground and boots on the ground to organize, to support workers to organize.
Did that lead to any other type, you talk about the Wagner Act, but did that lead to other legislation that made it difficult to organize or do collective bargaining?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in 1947 is when Taft-Hartley was passed, which was a law that, created a lot of difficulties for organized labor, and it was really, again, passed by the Southern Dixiecrats. It really pushed it. They wanted to maintain Jim Crow. They wanted to be able to continue to hold on particularly to black workers and keep them without having any political or any organized power on the job in industry at all.
Right.
And so passed right-to-work law. Taft-Hartley was what enshrined right-to-work and allowed states, particularly Southern states, to create their own laws to make it very difficult to organize labor.
And then in 1959, did they pass? That's when North Carolina first landed.
Yes, ma'am. So this, exactly. So, as the civil rights movement was going and building in the 40s and 50s, and there was lots of organizing happening in the community, the black community fighting segregation, fighting Jim Crow, fighting against murders, lynchings, and things. There was a growing movement also, in the workplaces where black workers were also largely organizing for political power. for economic power, right, over their own conditions. And in the 1950s, there actually was organizing happening, particularly in Charlotte, with city workers. And it was in 1959 that in Wisconsin, public workers became the first public, government, state and government workers to create a framework for collective bargaining so they could have a union contract. So they could bargain collectively as workers with their employer, public workers, with their government, right? Before, the Wagner Act was mostly deal with private workers and factories and stuff, but then this was a precedent of government workers, state and city, local, county government workers having the ability to organize contracts. And so when government workers here in the South, in North Carolina, were trying to organize in 1959, an all-white state legislature, 1959, only 3 women. This is, very much a Jim Crow legislature, passed this Jim Crow law, General Statute 9598, which is still on the books today, which was the first state, North Carolina became the first state that proactively banned, made it illegal for public workers, city work, teachers, firefighters, state workers to have collective bargaining, to actually bargain with the government, to bargain with their employer around the terms and conditions of work, around their wages, benefits, health and safety issues, anything, made it totally legal.
So what I'm hearing then is that this movement, as far as collective bargaining, a lot of this was happening at the same time that things were happening as far as civil rights and getting more, rights. I mean, as far as the right to work, and get hired and not discriminate in places where you eat and, and all those kind of things. So listen, we're going to go to some music.
Cool.
When we come back, what I want to do is then let's talk about the efforts. Now that we know the history, let's talk about the efforts of what's happening right now. 2017, 2018, what has been going on in North Carolina as far as our efforts, because the struggle is still alive, very much still alive. This is Spectacular Magazine Radio Show. I'm Phyllis Coley. We're on Foxy 107, 104. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Can I show you my shirt? I know, is this backwards on there?
No.
Okay, hi. So I have a shirt on. What we're challenging you to do is to do something spectacular. Today is that day. Today, we were just talking about that in the studio. When the idea comes and you said do something, do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you get up and you want to do something spectacular. These shirts were designed by Willie Hyman and the people over at Greek Sneaks, and that's GreekSneakz. They do everything for all of the step teams and dance teams, and they got boots. They will design special boots for you and your step team. Great, 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 great location. I want to tell you about 2 events that we have coming up soon. On Thursday, February 22nd, is our Young Professional Meetup. This is for 20 and 30-year-old like-minded professional individuals who want to come together, build a coalition, start working together. It's going to be from 6 to 8. It's at the Millennium Hotel in Durham. That's 2800 Campus Walk Avenue in Durham. It's totally free and it's free parking. But come out. I mean, it's fabulous. Let me tell you, the last one we had was great. I mean, there was a young lady there who was getting married, right? Or who is getting married. There was a Mary Kay person there. There was an image consultant person there. There was a photographer there. There was a DJ there. So right there in that place, she got several of the things that people that she needed contracted for her wedding. But now think about those 3 or 4 individuals that got a contract. They walked away with a contract. That's the kind of things that we do. And then if not, we also have Live Jazz coming on March 9th, still at the Millennium Hotel, 8 to 10, and we're going to have Al Strong. Great jazz guy. You guys all know Al. He's also I think he teaches jazz, head of the jazz department over at St. Augustine's University. So you guys do it. But like my shirt, Lawrence, show him and and we also have sweatshirt. Turn around and show the sweatshirt. And that's Spectacular Mag, because we are spectacular.
1 minute.
We got 1 minute? Okay. Thank you.
That's like a sanitation worker,
Right.
That's right. Yes. Western Restaurant. We wanted to.
Listening to the Spectacular Magazine radio show on Foxy 107 104. All right, let's just open that up.
Okay, no problem. Welcome back to Spectacular Magazine radio show on Foxy 107 104. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley. In the studio with me is Dante Strobino, field organizer for North Carolina Public Service Union UE 150, Local 150. And we're talking about 50 years after the strike, the sanitation workers strike in Memphis. Is North Carolina ready for unions? Dante, I ask you that question. Is North Carolina ready for unions? What have you seen?
We're coming.
Yeah, are you coming? So tell me, what have you seen as far as the organizing and far as what you've experienced since you've been here in North Carolina?
Oh yeah, well I've been in North Carolina most of my whole life, but I mean, as many folk didn't know what unions were, and of course North Carolina still remains. It's going back and forth with South Carolina, the least unionized state in the country, but also the most potential. A lot of the Fat for 15 movement with fast food workers really took hold here. It really grew strong, particularly all around the state, from eastern North Carolina to the Triad to Charlotte to Durham, the Triangle.
So that we make sure that people understand this is raise up to 15 to raise the minimum wage.
Yeah.
From $7.25.
Yeah, we can't survive on $7.25.
Right, up to $15.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, but what about with city workers?
Yes, ma'am. So there's been a concerted campaign to organize, strategically with city workers because of the role that they play in society, and so the important services that they provide our communities and the connection they have with keeping health and keeping the water flowing and keeping the streets, paved and things. And so we've been organizing across the state for 15, 20 years. Folks have been organizing since the 60s, 70s. During some of these same struggles you're talking about in '68, there was efforts to organize Durham workers. Also in 1968. That participated in some actions, and there's been continued organizing And so coming out of that, we've been building a statewide campaign for a municipal workers' bill of rights the last several years, particularly in '06 when the sanitation workers in Raleigh went on strike, and built it was a big high point. And from there, I've been really learning and building organization, building our union in many cities across the state.
What cities have you been really active, the most active right now?
So a lot of folks have most recently heard about the last year or so. Greensboro, there's been a big effort to kind of rebuild, and there's been a lot of the workers that have really taken hold to it. But also in Charlotte, when the DNC was in Charlotte in 2012, we made sure to remind the city and the state and the world that North Carolina has these anti-labor laws, and if the Democrats are going to come here, they better talk about the real issues that people are struggling with. And so we put that on the table, and actually the city of Charlotte, recognized our union for payroll reduction after that. And so, also, Durham has been holding down, Raleigh, and even down eastern North Carolina in Greenville and Rocky Mount, we've been organizing. So really all around the state, and trying to continue to build on the momentum to kind of build a statewide movement, because we have to have all these state preemption laws that take power, like House Bill 2 and others, that take power from city governments in a number of ways, trying to take away their ability to control their municipal water supplies, their municipal airports. They can't pass minimum wage ordinances to support to raise the wages of workers, the working conditions, make those better. And so we have to have a statewide movement, not only to fight City Hall, but also to push the state legislature to change some of these things, like the ban on collective bargaining we're talking about as a general statute of state law.
So what wasn't one of the first things that also happened in North Carolina when you started with the UNC housekeepers?
Yes, ma'am.
As far as that UNC system.
Yeah, in terms of the efforts to organize, it really goes back to some of the good friends, comrades that were part of an organization called Black Workers for Justice that really started here in the early 80s. They really laid the foundation and started to build across the state organization in about 10, 11 counties. Organizing all kinds of manufacturing workers, public workers. Many of them got jobs and helped to build, and had been organizing across the state. But really, and there's the Cummins diesel engine plant in Rocky Mount was a big catalyst that helped draw the national support of our national union, the UE, the United Electrical Radio Machine Workers of America, which is part of our national union that we're part of, the UE. But really, in the late 90s, in 1997. Housekeepers, all black housekeepers at UNC organized on the basis of second-class citizenship, of the straight racism, low wages, the conditions they were facing, and built the UNC Housekeepers Association, right? And so us linked up with the NAACP, folks helped to support them at Chapel Hill. But what we did as a union, we said, hey, to build power, it's important to fight at your institution and go against your immediate boss, but we have to look at industry-wide to have more power, because if they can't just improve the wages at one facility, they got to do it. There's 16 universities in the UNC system, so we began to organize system-wide at all the universities, the blue-collar workers, the housekeepers, the groundskeepers, food service workers, to build power with the students and with the civil rights movement, the leaders in those areas to push, and that became the basis of the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union.
If people feel like they've been discriminated against and they're they don't have a right to bargain and those kinds of things, but they're afraid that if they start to do it, they're going to lose their job. What do you say to that?
It's really interesting because it's actually our experience has been to the contrary, right? It sometimes you may not believe it, but we have a lot of rights and we have a lot of power that we can exercise, right?
Okay.
And so when we start to organize, workers realize that if they start to link up together, they start to get together and they start training on the rights. They start maybe going to work one day and they all wear buttons or do something small to send a message to the boss that they're organized. Oftentimes, rather than the boss coming after folks, especially if it's in groups, right?
Yes.
Do something by yourself is not powerful. You don't have power alone. We have power collectively as a class, as groups of workers, right? And so coming forward concertedly, we have protect. There's also extra legal protections when you come together as a group, different than as an individual. And so when people come forward, we find that actually bosses will respect you more and be like, hey, Miss Phyllis, good to see you this morning, because they know that you know your rights. You're organized. You got people that got your back. You're not alone, and you aren't playing. And if they try to come at you, you got something to stand on, right? You're not just swinging in the air, but you're really standing on firm ground in terms of your rights and organizing with your coworkers.
But what I'm hearing you say also is about coworkers.
Yeah.
So it's better if there's someone who's inside of the company, more so than you say as a field organizer,
Right. Yeah.
to have someone inside. Why is
Yes.
that important?
Well, it's really important that we encourage each other because we learn. Because I'm not in your workplace, right? Workers, our message is that workers know what's needed in their workplace. They're the experts.
Yes.
It's encouraging each other and learning the lessons of how to work together. What are those social networks in your job, in your workplace that you can pull together to organize, to put pressure, to increase your wages, to increase your conditions, and make it more safe.
And then that person is there every day when
Every
when
day.
issues
That's right.
occur. So more so than you as the field organizer,
Right.
and you're across the state, and
That's
so would you say your job is more to educate?
Yeah,
And-
it's
and-
to help,
and
help
as
get things
organized.
started. That's right.
So if someone is interested in learning more, how should they reach you? How can
They
reach
can
the
call our
organization?
union at 919-539-2051. That's 539-2051. We have organizations all across the state. We love to meet with workers, whether you're a private worker or a public worker. We're building workers' assemblies here in Durham. We're building the Durham Workers Assembly. We have many workers in many different industries, fast food workers, construction workers, workers at Duke and the SEIU, their union campaign,
Yes.
domestic workers, the We Dream and Black chapter, all have been coming together with the North Carolina AFL-CIO.
And mental health workers.
And state
And
mental health
state
workers.
mental
Yes,
health
ma'am.
workers, and I think that's when one of the reasons I became aware of it with Folk and Butner,
Yes.
and the different issues that were happening
Yes.
there. So I think that those are one of the things. So we have that information. Thank you for talking to us about the unions. But before you go, Dante, I know that you were involved in the protest that took place in Durham on August 14th, I think it was, where the
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes. All of this is allegedly. The Confederate statue was brought down, the Confederate statue that sits in front of the courthouse. Could you bring us up on the status of that case?
Yeah.
How many people were charged, where you
Yeah.
are now?
There's been a big community struggle, of course, to take the statue down for long before then. The community took it down. There was 15 of us originally arrested. 3 that were arrested for armed to the terror. The people that Friday, when there's a big uprising, came out with guns and with hatchets defending our community. They have had all their charges dropped. The rest of us are going to be in trial. 3 other people also had their charges totally dropped because there was no charge against them at all. So 8 of us are going to be in trial this coming Monday, tomorrow. We're going to be in trial. It's a bench trial.
That's February 19th.
February 19th. So
Okay,
please come join us down at the courthouse. Judge Battaglia will be in his courtroom. 8:30 in the morning, we have a press conference. Come join us in the morning. But from 9 to 8 p.m., all 8 of us are going consecutively. We'll be in court all day.
So they're doing courts. I mean, I know court starts at 9 o'clock, but they're going to be doing the cases
all
back
day,
to back.
Back to back. They're trying to get them all in one day. They're probably not going to get through all of it. But we're going to have a solidarity demonstration at 6 p.m. Tomorrow, Monday, February 19th, gathering at the side of the old Confederate monument and marching to the courthouse. Gathering on Main Street, marching to the courthouse on Dillard
Main
Street.
Street, Durham.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
In
yeah.
Durham. So please come to the Durham courthouse. Show us. We're trying to pack the courts. We have friends and supporters from around the country in town this weekend to pack the court. We're saying fighting white supremacy is not a crime, right? The community's got a right to challenge white supremacist institutions and these monuments that represent them. There's been 5 deaths in the Durham County Jail in the last couple of years under the watch of Sheriff Andrews. 5 black people have been killed in the jail. These are folks that are too poor to place bond. If they had bond, they'd be out free. But because they're sitting in the jail, they died. They lost their lives. The same county jail, that has also been raiding the high schools and pulling out undocumented kids, terrorizing kids like Wilden Acosta from their high schools and trying to deport them and break apart people's families. All these struggles are connected. These institutions of white supremacy, we said that monument represented all this. All these evictions that the sheriff enforces on black and brown people in Durham, pushing them out, gentrifying these spaces. All this goes back to, again, these institutions of white supremacy in Durham County, and they upheld that monument of Confederacy. So the community took it down. We'll be in court tomorrow. You can go to Defend Durham to learn more about it on Facebook.
Dante Strobino, thank you so much for all the work that you're the state. Dante is a local organizer with the North Carolina Public Service Workers UE Local 150. Today we've been talking about, this is the 50th anniversary, actually February 12th was the 50th anniversary of the strike starting in Memphis for the Memphis sanitation workers, where Dr. King went and where he eventually lost his life 2 months later. There's a lot going on. Visit spectacularmag.com for all your information. I'm Phyllis Coley. This is Spectacular Magazine radio show. I'm so used to saying spectacularmag.com. Thank you so much. Until next time, see ya.